And a very good evening to you. I am Lisa Lord, and my special guest is the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados, or ICAB, Miss Tracy Marshall. Good evening, ma'am. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for having me.
You're
Thank
most
you.
welcome. Yeah. It's been a while.
I know. We've been trying to connect,
yes.
and I know we're here now,
I know we're here,
looking
yes.
forward to the discussion.
Indeed, so am I. So let's start by dissecting ICAB, which was established by an Act of Parliament back in 1974 with some pretty heavy regulatory responsibilities.
Yeah, so ICAB as a body, as you rightly said, was created by an Act of Parliament. So we just didn't, come out of the woodworks. We did have some members who many years ago decided they wanted to get together, but then it was all formalized through this Act of Parliament in 1974. So if you crunch the numbers, next year we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary. As a body, we are both a member organization as well as that of a regulatory body. And from a member perspective, we have members from all spheres, whether you are a practitioner in private practice, whether you are in public practice like I am. I'm actually an auditor and assurance partner with EY, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're working in industry, and whether you're working in government. So from a membership perspective, we have all various forms and operating in all sectors. We even have attorneys who are also members of the Institute. We also have students. We have just about 800 student members, and those students will be the ones who are still pursuing like a professional designation, and we can talk a little bit about that later. And then we also have like persons who are still retired members that will be a part of us. So, and we have overseas members as well, persons who might have lived in Barbados, became members, but went and maybe living in Bermuda or Cayman and still want to be a part. And obviously you pay a bit of a reduced fee at that level, but you still have those overseas members. So wide membership base. But then we also have the other arm of what we do as that of a regulator.
Yes.
And as you rightly said, when we were formed, part of what we were set up to do was to regulate those members. And not if you're just, obviously if you're a student, you're not going to be at that level for regulation as yet. But if you're practicing, and by practicing, I mean signing off audit opinions or issuing opinions, signing accounts for certain organizations, we as a body are responsible for what we call practice monitoring. So in public practice, like I am, we go through the regulation of making sure that you're keeping up to date with your continuing professional development. We ensure that you're keeping up with the standards, and obviously we put on various sessions, whether they're through webinars or in-person sessions, to ensure that everybody is getting their continued development that is needed. And it's all about maintaining a standard. When somebody gets a set of financial statements signed by an auditor or signed off by an accountant who is indeed a member of ICAB, you want to make sure that what you're getting is something that can be trusted. Obviously, all that we do is done with reasonable assurance, but you want to be comfortable that the numbers that are being presented and the ratios that are being presented to you are from a credible source. And if you have that from somebody who is a member of ICAB and practicing, as a regulatory body, we have to make sure that that individual is maintaining, from an ethical perspective, the right integrity and keeping up to date with all that is required to be able to maintain your professional designation.
And let's stick a pin there on professional designations. We see CFA, we see FCCA, but what do those letters mean to the average person?
So as an accounting body, the CFA group is really like a certified financial advisor. They actually have their own fraternity as well. We do have some persons who will start with, let's say, the ACCA. For example, I'm an ACCA, which is a member of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants. You also have persons who would have done CPA, which is a certified professional accountant. All it really means is you've done a designation or you've done professional exams from various locations. The ACCA program is really coming out of the UK. The CPA program, there were actually two types. There's the American CPA, which is done by the US Institute, and then you have the Canadian CPA. And we have members who all carry these various designations. What it means is that you've done some basic exams in terms of, you might have gone through to university. Some people might have taken up these professional exams and didn't even go to university, because you can start at the foundational level and you work your way all the way up. But these designations are widely recognized. They're international designations. So when you sit in Barbados and you complete a professional designation, you are a member of a body that is an international one. From an ICAB perspective, we are also a member of an international body, being that of the IFAC, which is the International Federation of Accountants. And as a part of that body, we too are also regulated through IFAC's reviews. We also have to maintain what we call SMOs, which is member objectives, to be able to become a member of the International Federation of Accountants. So it's not that, you just form an institute in your local designation, in your local jurisdiction, and it stops there. We are also a member of that international body. So as it relates to the designations, various forms, we recognize most of them. So for example, we will have persons who, let's say, coming into the island and maybe working and coming from somewhere like Pakistan or India, they will have designations in their institutes, in their locations, that we do the assessment to compare with how does this line up with maybe like the other international bodies that, you're more familiar with. And we too then, once you meet that criteria, we will admit you to membership for ICAB. So we do actually have a number of members who carry, these various designations. It's hard work, as they will tell you, any designation that you have to do, because you have to put in the hours. And when you get that designation, Lisa, it doesn't stop there. You have to maintain your continuing professional development, and you have to continue that continuing professional education. It's like, you don't want that somebody's done a designation 15, 20 years ago. The standards to which we operate or we have to meet continue to change year on year. And therefore, to be able to maintain that level of professionalism and to maintain that technical competency, you have to continue with your professional education. So you have CPD, which is what we call it, continuing professional development or continuing professional education, where each member has to make sure there are a number of hours in a year, as well as cumulatively, that you have to maintain in order to either maintain your membership with us as an institute and even maintain that membership with your international professional body. So it definitely does not stop when you finish that one exam or you complete that final set of exams. It continues because you want to make sure that you're maintaining that level of professionalism.
It might seem like a no-brainer, but let's look at the importance of accountants and accounting.
Yeah. So if you think about how anything is run, it all ends in finance. It all ends with recording the debits and credits. You all want to understand, how much money did I bring in? How much money did I spend? Was it worth it? Was it a worthwhile investment? Should we do it differently? And that's where the accountants coming. Accountants and accountancy, just like economics, backbone of running small businesses, large businesses, not-for-profit organizations, governments, economies. Like you can't, in my mind, do without an accountant. And I tend to share with people that you should see the accountant as somebody who is your friend and wanting to see your business succeed. When we talked a lot to like the small businesses, if you think about it, larger organizations, they will probably understand there is a need to have a professional accountant on board. Obviously, there's reporting to various boards and various committees, etc. So those are in place. But when you have the small businesses which to my mind are fundamental to any well-functioning economy or any well-functioning country, we need the small businesses, especially in a country like ours. I want people to understand that the accountant should be there with you from the beginning, even from incorporation, when you set up. What are you taking to the bank if you want to get financing? What are you going to be looking at, each month to see how am I performing? What am I doing in terms of filing my taxes and making sure that I file my annual returns? Here is where your accountant comes in. Here's where your accountant comes in to tell you and assist you with getting that level of financing. Do I go to the credit union? Do I go to the bank? Do I go and I work with my parents and see if I can get some help? if you're not into that on a daily basis, here's where the accountant comes in to help you. And what we have found is some persons see it more as it's a cost and not adding value. And I want persons to understand that accountants, a true accountant, is there to add value to your business and not coming in as the firefighter. Oh my gosh, I have this problem. Now I need to bring in the accountant, which is at the back end. And sometimes we have to put on our firefighting suits, right? But it is see us from the beginning and we will help you through that process. And that's where I see accountants and accountancy being so important, because at the end, we can't function without money. I say money and data these days, right? Because data is just important as like cash and managing your cash. One time the concept was cash is king. Yeah. It's moved really now to data is king. But the reality is you need to be able to manage, how your business is operating and the reports that you're getting. How are you really getting the financing? And that's where your accountant comes in. And I think that's where accountancy is fundamental, not just to businesses, but as I said, to governments and well-run economies. Like if you think about taxes, we have persons from a committee perspective, and we can talk about some of our committees. We have persons that are tax experts. How do you look at the tax regimes that have been formed, and how does that impact businesses? How does that impact the average citizen? And therefore, what do we need to continue making sure that the country functions well? And all of that is hinged on the accountant. So we do have a big role to play. And we really see our role as being key, not just at the end of the process, but from the beginning all the way through.
You kind of touched on it when you said that accountants are seen as not necessary. However, they're also seen as expensive.
Yes. So we've had that. And there's a cost to everything. So some persons will say, well, I can't really afford an accountant. Mm-hmm. What we do at ICAB, and we just ran it's not a survey, but we ran a program to get some volunteers to assist us with working with Small Business Association, Financial Literacy Bureau,
Fund access,
mm-hmm. where generally we appreciate that the average small business starting up would not be able to cover the entire cost. You're selling a service, and it is, how can we meet you with the requirements that you have? How can we assist? And we have a number of volunteers. Our membership is just over 1,000. And I can tell you the response has been pretty overwhelming, where we are willing, and we've helped before, we will help now, and we will continue to help all of these institutions because we see it as important. And to me, the way we can see the country growing and economies growing is just sharing your knowledge. And there's an appreciation. Yes, you'll have to pay. There might be a bit of a little stipend or something that you have to get. But a lot of what we will be doing with these institutions will be, in most cases, either free or cost or at a very nominal amount. And I encourage businesses, small businesses especially, you don't have to do it on your own. Use a number of these agencies that are in place who have the connections through to us. And there's nothing wrong with anybody picking up the phone and calling into the Institute to say, well, this is what I have and I would like some help. Is there a way that the Institute can help me? Because there are sessions that we plan to put on as well for some of the smaller businesses, just dissecting financial statements. What does an income statement or balance sheet need? Because we see all of that as important. So to your question around the cost, mm-hmm. Yes, there is a cost to it, but there's a cost that can be managed. And I would say use the resources that are available where they have touched base with us, and we have a pool that we will be given to, Fund Access, Small Business Association, etc. As I said, a lot of that is given freely. So a number of our members volunteer a lot of their time. Time, talent, and treasure is what we normally say at the church, but we also say that here within the Institute because that's what they do. They give up their time to assist with a number of the small businesses and these organizations. So you still have to give us some money. We still have to function and we still have to live and eat. But at the end of the day, it is not going to be at an exorbitant price where you can't afford it, because we see and we know the importance of giving that support to get your businesses up and running.
And I'm sure that small business owners are very happy to hear that.
I hope so.
Accounting is also very, very meticulous. Let me put my hand in the air and say that I did that at CXC level, and that was the end of it for me.
Oh, there. I could get you past
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Sure.
I'm fine. I'm good.
It is meticulous. It's not like if you're a surgeon and you're dissecting your nose and you're doing a bit of a surgery, but I would tell you, when you're doing your cash flow and a balance sheet, and the cash flow and the balance sheet all agrees and ties up, I get excited. Call me a bit of a nerd for something like that. But it can be very meticulous, and the standards that we operate to, some of them have become very technical. Technical to the point where it's not even just accountants involved. And I don't want to get into too much technical details, right? But there are standards that we currently report under that require us to use people who are in valuations, dealing with business valuations. There are standards that require us to use real estate valuers. There's a new standard coming in on what's being referred to as IFRS 17, which is the insurance standard, accounting for insurance contracts. You have to use the actuaries. So it has become very technical, and in aspects where it's not just about the accountant. You have to get other people involved. But bringing it back to the accountant and what we do, it comes down to debits and credits. And as I always say, on one hand, there's a debit, and on the other hand, there's a credit. These must clap. They must balance no matter what you do. So as technical as it gets, and I say that to some of my clients when there's a very technical transaction, I need to understand the basics. What is the debit? What is the credit? Fundamentally, something goes in. On the other side, something goes out. So it is meticulous, going back even to the designation and the level of exams that you have to go through. What I found, though, in terms of where the profession is going, is accounting is moving away, not entirely from the numbers, but you have a role now. Anybody who's going into maybe a CFO role, chief accountant, it's a well-rounded individual, and rounded in the sense of, if you think about what's happening in terms of reporting on ESG, environmental, social, and governance. Everybody's talking about, yes, and everybody's talking about, carbon emissions and being carbon neutral or carbon zero, and those things have a value to it. So the accountant before will know about, debits and credits. Retail, I buy a tin of milk, I sell 2 rolls of toilet paper, to account for that. But it's not at the point where, how do you value something like an emission? And as the accountant or the chief financial officer, how are you reporting that to your board? How are you reporting that to your committees? So you'll find that as the profession is and as the world is changing, what you're reporting on now is becoming very different to the traditional accounting or traditional reporting.
I saw you smiling when you spoke about CFOs and the direction in which they could take companies, etc. CEOs also have a lot of financial training as well. However, persons usually look at this as a hindrance because most of the time the focus is strictly on the bottom line.
Yeah. So in business, most people will say you're set up to make profits.
Of course.
Which is fair.
Yes.
You have your various stakeholders, whether that's your investors, your shareholders, etc. You have your employees as a key stakeholder, you have your owners, and everybody wants a bit of the pie. The CFO's role, I believe most people would see it as one that is, I'm holding the purse of this company and I'm keeping it tight, right? And sometimes there's a bit of angst. It is, they don't want to give us the money to do what we're supposed to do. And, I want to build this business, but the FC is holding back and don't want to give me the funds to do this. And I say to a number of persons within the C-suite, it has to be, what's the overall strategy of the company? And The CFO's role, to my mind, is there to support the implementation, execution, and the successful implementation of that strategy. If you go through and you can understand clearly, here are where the financing is coming from, here are the outflows, and the project is being managed well, the CFO is really your friend. You as the person, maybe let's say in sales, and you need to be able to get the funding to purchase X amount of stock because I don't want to stock out. Let's use Christmas. Christmas is coming up. You tend to hear, I need to stock up because I don't want that. I have people coming into the store at Christmas time and to say I don't have inventory. Loss of inventory is loss of revenue. And it's, oh, the CFO didn't want to release the check.
Oh no, that money is held tight.
Right, right. They're holding it too tight. That is, you need to understand business. And I think sometimes people view the CFO as you have to be very well-rounded. And it's the same thing from an audit perspective. And I always go back to an auditor because I'm an auditor at heart. To understand and to audit, you need to understand all aspects of business. You have to walk the warehouse. You have to engage with the customers. You have to engage with the salespeople. You need to understand the business. And that's why the statistics will show that persons who are in the CEO role, chances are more than just about 50% of them have that finance background, because finance then rolls up into overall how everything functions. But the reality is the finance, the chief or the person holding the purse needs to understand the impact he or she has to the fundamental success of the organization. And it can't be just, I don't want to release these funds. There must be a good reason why you don't want to release the funds. Some person on the other end might not have line of sight of there's a debt that has to be repaid. And therefore, have you gone back and see if I can get a better price on this? And that's where the CFO really should be pushing back to say, have you gone back and you've done your negotiations? Have you received some discounting? And it's already to the benefit of the business. And of course, it comes down to the bottom line, yes. But the reality is you have to still be able to manage, and you have to be a strategic supporter of the overall strategy of the company. So I don't want anybody to see the CFO as the enemy. Embrace your CFO, engage your CFO to understand why is it that we can't get the funding to do X, Y, and Z. There probably is a story behind it, something that you may not understand. But I see that role as key to being able to execute the overall strategy of any business that has a well thought out process. The CFO has to be a part of it. You have to be a part of that C-suite team.
Ms. Marshall, still a lot more to discuss. Stay with us. You're watching One on One.
Keep it clean, keep it green.
Barbadians, we invite you to get involved and play your part as we clean and green Barbados. Come into your community with media launches, bulk waste collection exercises, community engagement sessions, and giveaways. Get on board. Let's keep Barbados clean and green.
Beautiful, beautiful Barbados.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Danielle Reed Mulilo and I'm a general physician, and today we're going to talk about diet for obesity prevention. Your diet is everything you eat and drink. When you're having a meal, ideally we would like for at least half of your plate to be made up of vegetables. You also want to have protein with every meal. Protein helps you to keep satiated or full. Also, you want to have complex carbohydrates, for example, brown provisions, and less simple carbohydrates such as bread, pasta, and biscuits. Water should be your main beverage. You want to increase your water intake because it's good for your body. You also want to decrease alcohol intake. Your doctor will be able to tell you if you have any dietary restrictions, and a consultation with a dietitian will make this much easier.
The Coastal Zone Management Unit wishes to advise the public that the reefs along the coast of Barbados are currently experiencing coral bleaching. Coral bleaching is a phenomenon where corals lose their natural coloration and appear bright white as a consequence of stress. In this bleached state, corals are vulnerable and may die if bleaching persists. Given the elevated water temperatures we have seen in recent weeks, it is believed that the coral bleaching is due to heat stress. It is hoped that once temperatures return to normal, the corals will recover. The Coastal Zone Management Unit will continue to monitor the situation and update as required. Thank you.
Welcome back as we continue our discussion with the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados, Ms. Tracy Marshall. Now, Ms. Marshall, does ICAB have any concerns about accounting practices in the private sector?
I wouldn't say that they're concerns. What we are embarking on is to ensure that a number of persons who we know are qualified accountants are becoming members of the Institute. It's not mandatory.
Right.
That's the first thing I want to make clear. It's not mandatory that you have to become a member, but it's important that you become a part of a membership organization such as ours because of the regulatory aspect of it. There is a public interest that we have to maintain. And of course, if you are out there and you're practicing and something nefarious happens for whatever reason, someone might pick up the phone and call us at the Institute and say, well, my accountant has done X, Y, and Z. And we will say, okay, are you willing to share who that accountant is? And we will check the database and realize this person is not a member. In a situation like that, there will be concerns because there is an association of accountants. And from the time you hear, oh, well, this person was an accountant, you may automatically think that they're associated with ICAB or they're a member. But if that person is a member of the Institute, there is a process that we can go through in terms of investigations if the actual individual launches an official complaint to us. And let me just say that we have separate committees set up to deal with actions or activities that may have been viewed as misconduct or malpractice or issues that might have bring disrepute to the institute or even to a member itself, him or herself. And therefore, as we go through the disciplinary process, there's an investigations process, there's an appeals process that can take place depending on how far the investigations go. But we want persons who are out there practicing and who deem themselves to be accountants to come into the fold so that we can ensure that the professional development is maintained, you're continuing to be up to date with the standards. We don't want that you're out there practicing and you just don't know what level you're at. And we also want that from a public perspective, if something goes wrong, you have the opportunity to come back to us and we can then take action on a particular member who has, might have been doing something that is not of good ethical or high integrity, because ethics and integrity is at the backbone of all that we do. Of course, we stand by our members and we support our members should something come up and they have gone through the right processes, they have gone through the right channels that they should have. We support our members in that regard as well. So it's twofold. So there are some concerns that there are people who are practicing that we want to come in to make sure that they're members, so that from a public interest perspective that we know that they too are all covered.
No, I heard you talk about all these steps, but the public wants to know, what kind of discipline are we talking about? Are we just talking about losing membership in ICAB? What kind of discipline?
So it depends obviously on the severity of
misappropriating the funds of a client.
Yeah. So if some person has misappropriated funds, I would always say you are innocent until you are proven guilty. Right? And in most cases like that, Lisa, some person will call into the institute or maybe send a formal written complaint around this particular member of ICAB has done X, Y, and Z. We then take that to the investigations committee. Now, that investigations committee actually has persons outside of the institute. Right. And we want to, and that is for obvious reasons.
Yeah,
we
course.
Want to keep the lines free of bias, transparency in a matter as severe as that. You go through the investigations committee. As the president, I'm not even made aware of if there's a member, because of obviously you want to make sure I'm a member of ICAB. So therefore you want to keep those lines cleared. Once the investigations are done and there's action that has to be taken, that then goes to the disciplinary committee. And our disciplinary committee even has members of the bar, from the Bar Association, because more than likely, it becomes a legal matter.
Of course.
Now, when it becomes a legal matter and the institute has, the member, him or herself, is being, let's say, taken to court by, let's say, the company that has brought this allegation against them, we are not involved in terms of going into court or anything like that. But that member then will be removed. There's a disciplinary process in terms of whether it's removal, there's no fines or anything like that, but all of that then gets settled with the member settling directly with the company. But from an institute perspective, you're normally then removed from the membership. I will say that if that member is obviously you're holding a professional designation, that goes all up to your professional designation as well. And just like us, as they have their disciplinary actions that will be taken, more than likely that results in you being your designation. Those letters that we talked about earlier,
right.
You get stripped of those letters. There is a publication that is made. There are persons who you can go on the websites and see who have actually been removed. Of course, you don't disclose why the person has been removed, but there are severe actions that have to be taken, because you don't want that somebody who has done something nefarious continues to practice out there, and you're still saying I'm a member of the institute and you're doing something that is totally unethical. So I would say, since my time as presidency, I have not had any reports of such activity, but I can tell you that there is a process in place should a matter like that come before us. And we want to keep the lines and we want to make sure there's no bias in the process. And therefore we have persons on the outside who are not members to bring that transparency to the entire process.
I know that ICAB collects data. I know you said since you were president, you did not have those complaints, but prior to your presidency, is it something ICAB has seen increasing?
From my knowledge, I would say no. And I don't know if it's a case where persons have just not called up the institute to make various complaints. I will say that there are a couple of cases that have come before us in the last few years, not specifically to something like a misappropriation of funds, but various, minor issues. There are cases that might have started, and then the person who raised it would have said, well, no need for us to pursue this. So I am not aware to say that over the years, and I've sat on council now for 3.5 years, to say that nothing, I've seen an increase in such activity. I would say to you though, Lisa, what we've been doing is a lot more sensitization and making, not just our members, but making the public also aware of what is in place. Should something happen that you think you need to raise it. What we've been doing is making sure that there's an increase in knowledge sharing sessions around not just technical issues, but things like ethics, good corporate governance, just so that these make you well-rounded and persons are aware that if I'm in practice, these are all activities that I need to make sure that I am upholding. So I can't say that I've seen an increase over the years in any such reports coming to us.
So we touched on the private sector, public sector.
Yeah.
Everybody looks forward to the Auditor General report, and ICAB does as well.
Indeed.
And every year, your response is the same thing, the same systemic deficiencies, the late submission of reports, etc.
Yeah. So the last Auditor General's report, we did have a publication in terms of a commentary in a response to what we've seen coming out of it. As you rightly said, systemic issues. Mm-hmm. We've seen same type of SOEs not reporting on time, I will say though that I have seen a couple of them have made some improvements. I will say, I've seen that in terms of reading the report. But I think generally, and I'm wearing my auditor hat here too, it comes around the level of audit readiness in some cases. So there are various issues why an audit will not go to plan. And our general comment on the Auditor General's report was that the Auditor General himself and his team needs the support.
Yeah.
You can't have persons who are, and auditors are, despite what people think, it's a specialized type of work that you do, right? It takes training, it takes time. So if you have persons who've been built up in the department, and from reading the report, they're then sent off to another government agency because there's a short staff, then how well can you really function? And the Auditor General's report, I think, is a key piece of information that comes out of how are the public's funds being managed? What are the issues that you're seeing? And in a discussion we recently had with one of the ministers, Minister Honorable Ryan Strawn, we shared ICAB's willingness to support and having some audit readiness sessions. Because even from a private practice, you will go in and you would realize an audit can only go as smoothly as however the client is ready and preparation. And there's sometimes it takes years, Lisa, depending on the size and scale of the audit. But persons have to understand and appreciate what goes into an audit. You know, you can't just walk into the room and say, well, I need X, Y, and Z and expect that everything is going to be readily hand-delivered. And then if you don't get it, the Auditor General has to report it. But sometimes it might be a case of, I just needed a little bit more time to pull the package together. And not necessarily that anything is going on untoward that needs to be raised. So there's a level of audit readiness that I think needs to go into it. There's also a need for qualified accountants in public practice. And we shared this with the minister in terms of the attractiveness of the profession. And we're looking at this globally. It's not just from a government perspective. When somebody leaves university and we attend the career fairs and we say, okay, generally within my practice, we do a level of hiring every summer. I want to see government there. I want to see somebody from the Ministry of Finance and they have a booth and encourage people to also come into the public sector. And we also need to look at the curriculum. When you go into school, there's nothing in the curriculum that teaches you about the Public Financial Management Act. There's no real thought around government accounting. There are a whole set of standards under government reporting, which is called IPSAS, which is the International Public Sector Accounting Standards. Something like that needs to be made aware of to persons and students because there are opportunities in government and you need qualified persons in the government space. One of the things we've been encouraging government to do is to engage us. Engage not necessarily just from an expert perspective or a specialist perspective, but the fact that we are so close to business and we are seeing all spheres and we have persons within the institute and members within the institute who are working at all areas, all industries, all sectors. So just engage us a little bit more. So on the government side, there is a need to have, especially for the Auditor General and the support that is needed there. There is a need to have the qualified resources in place. And there's a need for us to go out and work with the SOEs in terms of the audit readiness sessions. And I think that in itself will also go a long way. You can't have negative cash. Like, what's negative cash? You know, it's stuff like that we think is low-hanging fruit. And maybe it's just timing. Sometimes the timing of all of this doesn't work. But we did have a publication, and we are here to continue to lend our support, whether it's in the training sessions. I think corporate governance is a big area for SOEs. And the PFM Act speaks to a lot of it. And it really is the encouragement and making sure the regulation and the checking. Do you actually have the right people in place? Who are the chairmen of these boards? We're agitating that every SOE board should have a qualified accountant sitting on it. And I don't just say a qualified accountant, but a member of ICAB. Because once again, remember, you have qualified accountants who are not members. But we want that the terms of reference are all drawn up to say you must have at least one member of ICAB who is in good standing to be sitting on these boards, because you need the finance head in there to see what's happening with these funds. Is your audit committee set up the way it should be set up and properly constituted? Those are the areas that, from an institute, we want to see happening within the government space.
And know that we're on the topic of government. ICAB has been making representation to have a seat at the table when government is making certain financial legislative changes.
Absolutely, Lisa, absolutely. One of the things we have embarked on over the last couple of months is to have a lot more dialogue with government. As I said, we had a meeting with the minister in the Ministry of Finance, Honorable Ryan Strawn. We also had a meeting with Minister Cummins, Senator Lisa Cummins. We are also engaging stakeholders like the FSC, Financial Services Commission. And one of the things we want to encourage is engage us. We want to be there to lend a voice because of where we sit, because we have persons in practice, they're seeing it firsthand. We want to be able to share openly. These are some of the areas that we think you need to consider. And this is not just with the current government, this is, the opposition, whoever is there, and just want to hear, because this is all about country first. And that's where we sit. It is all about country. So we want to encourage, if there's a piece of legislation coming in, by all means, we have a legislation committee. And the legislation committee has accountants and it has attorneys. And that's because legislation obviously governs how the country functions. And we need to be a part of that, but not at the back end. It is when this is rolled out. And I will say, we've commented on areas such as like the constitution reform.
Yes.
And that information is readily available. The integrity legislation that was recently published, that we were also a part of in terms of making presentations over the years. It was long in coming, yes, but we want government to know that we are here as a sounding board and as someone to share firsthand what are we experiencing and how we think this will impact. So we think commenting on legislation is nothing new for us, and we want to be able to do it a lot more. As I said, given the level of specialists that we have within the membership base, it's important that we are engaged, and we want to continue to be engaged.
Diving a little deeper, if we look at the financial reporting framework in Barbados, now all companies incorporated under the Barbados Companies Act are required to file audited financials with the Registrar of Corporate Affairs if their gross assets and or revenues exceed $2 million. And these financials then are accessible to the public. Does ICAB have a problem with the current financial framework in place?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say there's a problem. We have a problem with the framework that is in place. Actually, we've been discussing the framework over the years, because the thresholds, which you just shared, is $2 million US, and those have moved from 500,000 to 1 million. We've seen the gradual increase from a small business perspective in the level of the thresholds. There is discussion as to whether should these thresholds move even further. If you think about some place like the UK, their thresholds for a micro business is about 700 and maybe 700,000 pounds for a micro. Now, we have a lot of businesses that probably will meet that criteria. For them, a small business will be maybe something like maybe 2 million pounds. So, you're getting into some of the ranges that, from where we operate in this space, it would make sense in terms of increasing the threshold. Now, an audit, in terms of looking at these financials that meet this threshold, what's the purpose? What is the purpose of the audit? Do these financials go to the auditor? To the financial institution in terms of if you had lending, or is it that if you're a government entity, automatically, you have the audits. But if you're just operating and it's just you as a shareholder or maybe one other shareholder, is $4 million a reasonable number? One can say, it's still too low. And there could be considerations to increase it, because what is the risk? All that we do from an audit perspective comes down to it's risk and reward. If I'm a sole proprietor and my company is making $8 million in revenue, it's just me, I have my employees to pay, I'm paying my taxes, and you can see my annual returns being filed on time, etc. Is there a real need for an auditor, right? What is the risk? Who is the risk really to? It gets riskier. There are concerns now when you have investors. And from the time you have investors, regardless of the threshold, you will be audited, right? So it comes down to what we call a public interest entity. And a public interest entity more than likely will be above that threshold of $4 million. So you automatically go into the audit realm. But there are discussions around, should we raise that threshold from a 4 million maybe to an 8 or a 10 million, depending on how the countries are expanding. If you think there's a standard that has been set up, which was in 2019 for small and medium-sized enterprises, right? It's called IFRS for SMEs. There's no threshold. It comes down to, do you have public accountability? Yeah. And therefore, because you don't have public accountability, you can report under these standards. So similarly, with the same audit threshold, do you need to move that audit threshold? Because do you have public accountability to anybody? There's a cost to an audit. And obviously, you still have to be able to manage that in business. So it is an ongoing discussion. I am sure that we will see some changes coming out of the thresholds as we go forward. But right now, there are no real concerns, I will say, in terms of the reporting framework that we have. We have a set of standards. Most of the companies will comply with those standards. So you either report under what we call full IFRS or IFRS for SMEs, which is what a lot of our small businesses will fall under. And then you have government that report under IPSAS. So from a reporting framework, I think Barbados, and then as an institute, we've come a long way in making sure that, we've ticked all of those boxes to say we have those standards in place, or we've adopted those standards. And we can see that reporting is happening with all of the companies that have elected to adopt the standards.
Ms. Marshall, increasingly more and more we are hearing about financial literacy. Now, we in December, Beijing's going to be shopping up. And that salary that you are getting paid early in December has to last until the end of January. So let's look at financial literacy, especially now around Christmas.
Yeah. Financial literacy is key throughout, from the student to the adult. I read something in the paper recently, even to the senior citizens level, right? With Christmas coming in, it's all going to be about budgeting. You have to look at, this is how much is going to come. No more incoming until what will feel like another 3 months, but it's only a month. And you have to figure out, how am I going to survive? Yeah. A lot of persons too tend to go and get Christmas loans. You get the Christmas credit cards. And I am not bashing any of the financial institutions at all. But you have to make sure you are looking at that fine print. What's the rates on these? Can I pay off really in 3 months and really get this at the cash price, as opposed to paying at the higher purchase and I'm paying for another 3 years, and the level of interest that is added on to that? It's going to come down to, once again, needs and wants. And I know at Christmas, we want everything. We want everything. We don't need it, but we want a gift. We want to do this. We want to do that. And there will be some incremental purchases that will be incurred. You can pull that from maybe a savings, but if you're going to be going into the debt, I would say you have to be conscious of those rates that you're going into. There will be a lot of programs in terms of Christmas loans, as I said, that will be offered. Credit card debt is extremely high. People tend to use the credit card like, it's all this available cash and I'm never going to have to pay. And if you look at the rates that you're going to have to pay, but a lot of this starts with in the schools.
Yes.
Financial literacy, to my mind, Lisa, is so important even at the junior level, because if you are teaching this in schools, and I know the government is currently looking at a program to roll it out. I think it's going to be about 12 schools come January, 6 primary and 6 secondary. And if you can have students understanding the difference between needs and wants, you see the marketing, it's drawing everybody. You're on TikTok and this looks good and this looks cool and I need to have this. And you realize, but you know what? Mommy has a light bill and a water bill to pay too. And there might be an understanding that I don't necessarily want this gift. Or I might have something that's a little more important and you put the money towards that. If you can encourage from student level, having an understanding of what are costs, what is income. You get your little piggy bank. We hear about a little piggy bank. How do I really save? All of this starts at the primary, secondary school level. And if you can bring that through into adulthood, even in terms of even how you're managing your business, financial literacy there are people out there with great ideas. I talk to people every day, young people who have these great ideas, but they just don't know where to start.
Yeah.
They don't know how to get the financing. They don't know. Somebody comes and say, okay, well, you need an income statement and balance sheet, or you need projections and budgets. And they're like, what is that? All of that is part of financial literacy. And we have to do our part. Whether we do it through, we have our Talking Finance sessions on the radios, on radio on Wednesdays. We obviously have the print media. We're going to be having some sessions that are freely available to the public to just sensitize them to, here's the importance of financial literacy and what really is involved. What does that mean? When somebody says, here's an income statement or here's a balance sheet, how do you get that done? How does it work? And what does it mean for you and your business and as you go forward? So it's important that you teach this from schools, but there's a role that we too have to play in terms of sensitizing the public, senior citizens, persons in trying to get smaller businesses set up on the importance of it, because it's the backbone too of economies, well-functioning economies. If you have strong financially literate citizens, you would realize that the economies function much better. And you have to buy a gift at Christmas, but I hope if you were financially literate or at least had that knowledge, there was a saving component that was happening from January down to November. So the outlay in December doesn't have to be the entire salary for the month of December.
And I know you know better.
And we know that's chances are what is going to happen. So here's where I'm saying we have that role to play to say, January 24, let's think about December 24, because from January all the way down to November, you have to start thinking about what do I want to do differently in December that I need to plan for from January. And that is all part of financial literacy and sharing. So I can tell you that ICAB is very passionate about this area. It is one that we're going to be working either with some other institutions to make sure from the junior perspective that we're rolling it out into the schools. We're sharing with the public through some of our free webinars. We're going to be putting information on our websites, working with like the same Fund Access, the Financial Literacy Bureau. We did some sessions with them. I believe it was during the COVID time, just on financial literacy for the public. And it's ongoing. It's ongoing because you will catch some, you will miss some. You catch some and you miss some. So you can't just say, I ran 2 sessions and, everybody is aware and now we have a financially literate community. It has to be an ongoing process.
So it really is as simple as balancing your needs and your wants. But I want to thank you for joining us on the program. It really, really was a pleasure and very insightful.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa. And I'm sure we have some other areas that we can touch on. And I look forward to another conversation with you.
So am I. Thank you very much. You're most welcome. That was Miss Tracy Marshall, the president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Barbados, or ICAB. I am Lisa Lord. You are watching One on One. Do have yourself a wonderful evening.